Very controversial subject among magic workers, weather magic. Now, some say that we shouldn't do weather magic at all. And the reason why is because it can have long-reaching consequences and effects on magic. Now, recent events have given me an opportunity to talk about that, and also to talk about what you can do to mitigate those effects. In other words, how to do weather magic right and how to do it wrong. Now, this is my horse chestnut tree, and as you can see, the leaves are brown and crumbling, and many of them have already fallen off. This is not because it's fall, this is because of a drought that's been affecting the Okanagan region, both in BC and Washington State, for a couple of months. We have tinder dry conditions here, and I gave up on my lawn, I gave up on gardening because it just, you know, I saved my wildflowers because it wasn't worth it. But more than that, there is an enormous forest fire raging in this region. Now, this fire actually started in Washington State, in the Okanagan region there, and across the border. I think the last figure was almost 7,000 hectares, and up until recently the sky has been just filled with the smoke here, enough that it's not even worth it to go outside, and people have been staying indoors because of the cloudiness and the thickness of the air. So, a bunch of witches in Washington State decided that they were going to do a spell to fix this, and they sent the word to any witches in BC who might want to work it. Now, I was considering this because this is pretty damaging, and I mean, what are witches for if not to maintain balance? However, a lot of witches, especially more experienced ones, tell you not to do weather magic at all. And the reason why is because it can be complicated and have long-reaching consequences that you weren't anticipating. On August 29th, the night of the full moon, several witches from Washington State and BC combined their efforts to create rain in the Okanagan region. That night, a massive storm hit the lower mainland and caused immense havoc. Flooding, power cut to 400,000 homes, trees falling, people seriously injured, and a grizzly escaping from the zoo. Was this a direct result of the witch's spell? Hard to say, but it worked. Here in the Okanagan, it's been raining steadily for a couple of days. Winds started blowing in towards the fire instead of out, preventing its spread, and temperatures dropped. Was it worth it? Well, I don't know. Yeah, I guess you'd have to decide if it's worth it to trade this.
Cross Highway 3 and 33.
Through the treetops, there was little to do but watch.
Holy smoke!
And run. Across the lower mainland, tree trunks snapping like toothpicks.
Watch out!
crashing onto cars, claiming at least one serious injury. Though a wind and rain warning had been issued, some seemed to be caught off guard. Not surprising, because according to Environment Canada, this storm hit us months ahead of schedule.
I think the reason is that magic influences probabilities. Weather is a chaotic system, and the slightest change in one area sends vast ripples, like the butterfly effect, that cause changes in other areas. Also, energy, as you know from physics, cannot be created or destroyed. So if you're going to take it from one area, if you're going to build in one area, you take it from another, and vice versa. Now, I thought about participating in this spell, and I had just about decided to do a spell on my own, and I was all gung-ho. And then I decided not to. Two reasons. One is that a friend of mine, one of my customers, did a spell here that I thought was far more practical, effective, and safer, and I'll show you how to do that in a few minutes. But the other is that this was too big. Now, the big mistake that people often make when they're doing weather magic is that they're in a hurry. And they also think that because weather is so vast and we are so small by comparison, I mean, it's nature, right? The forces of nature are overwhelming, right? It's generally thought that we need to put a lot more energy into it than we really do. And so what happens is people pump a whole bunch of energy all together at once into a particular area to cause a particular effect. And it overdoes it. Weather magic being a chaos system, it's much more effective, has many more long-reaching effects, and it's generally more productive and less damaging if you just kind of nudge it, just a little, and wait for it to build, rather than putting a whole vast amount of energy into it at once. I believe this is the big mistake that people make. So I won't tell you not to do weather magic. As a matter of fact, in some cases I believe that, what good are witches if we're not trying to maintain the balance of nature? But certainly we need to be cautious. The key to effective weather magic is to be gentle. My friend's spell. This bottle contains rainwater that was collected at the last major rainfall we had prior to the past couple of days. We didn't know why we were collecting it at the time, but we had an intuition to do so, and we froze a bunch of it and we put a bunch of it in our refrigerator. When my friend was given her vision that a spell was necessary, the first thing she did is she lit a match, and then she poured rainwater on it until it went out. Obviously, this signifies the fires and extinguishing them. The next thing she did was she took one of these drought-damaged leaves and she put it in this little chalice right here, and she poured more rainwater on it. How she did so was important. She was careful to pour just a little bit in her hand and sprinkle it. Now, obviously, the reason for this is to make sure that we don't get torrential downpours, major flooding, or any of the other sorts of damaging weather fronts that actually aren't going to put out our fire. It's just going to wash away the soil and is going to destroy property and possibly hurt people. So this was her method. I thought it was very clever. After that, she took the chalice here with the leaves in it, and she took it to a little sort of cairn that we have set up here to communicate with the local land whites, and she sat with it and meditated for some time until she felt the wind shift, and then she realized that things had come into effect and she stopped meditating. Now, I wanted to share that with you because I think that this is really sound magical theory. First of all, she was very careful to use all 5 senses. There were things you could smell, things you could look at, things you could touch, things you could taste, you know, the action of moving things around is very kinesthetic. So that's always good, because the more senses you bring to bear, the more effective your magic is. The second thing that she did really well is that her iconography was intuitive. It was easily understood, and it was a clear message both to her subconscious and to the local spirits. The third thing she did is she was careful to mimic clearly and visualize precisely what she wanted to have happen. And the fourth thing is that she was gentle, and she didn't mess around with it too heavily. All of this was very effective, and the next day we saw gentle rain. And it's been gently raining here off and on ever since. Now, I don't know whether or not that would have been as effective if there wasn't already a major weather front moving on the coast. However, there it is. Now, there's been a lot of positive effects around here. For instance, the cooler temperatures have made it easier to contain the fires. Obviously, there's no smoke in the air anymore. We've had this steady cycle of gentle rain and sun, and gentle rain and sun. It's shifting back around again. That's why it's windy right now. And also, the wind started blowing back in towards the fire as opposed to out from it, which stopped spreading it as quickly. So, good job. Now, other things that you can do in order to change the weather. One thing is to try to be very, very localized about it. 2 very effective weather magic spells that I can cite. One is, I was at a Beltane gathering on the lower mainland a couple years back, and weather forecast said, you know, really raining all weekend, which isn't unusual for the Vancouver area, but it is unusual for that early in the year. So, you know, various witches did some gentle magic to try to encourage it to be effective enough that we could do what we wanted to do. And we were disappointed because the rain did not go away. It continued raining steadily all weekend, although not a lot, you know, not enough to drown anybody out, not enough to make you pack up your tent, and it wasn't really cold. So when I left the site and I drove out into, you know, onto the highway to head home, I found that the entire area around it was swamped in a torrential downpour. Like, it was bad enough that I had to have the wipers on maximum setting and I could hardly see to drive. So it did work. It just didn't entirely get rid of the rain. That's another interesting point of note that one should keep in mind when doing weather magic, and that is that sometimes you will not get a complete black and white yes or no result. This is a complex system, and it's lesser and greater degrees of things, so you really have to consider it on a scale. If we want rain here, then there has to be an enormous amount of water coming in order to change the dry trend around here. So, you know, consider that when you're doing your work, right? If you want a torrential downpour in a desert, not likely, right? And if you want dry, clear, sunny days on, you know, in a rainforest, you're gonna have to work at that. And also, remember that that's probably not desirable. The more energy you put into it, the more ripples you create, the more damage you might be doing somewhere else. So try to be gentle, friendly, and work with the climate as opposed to against it. Now, the second way that you can handle weather magic is to make it very localized and very temporary. Because most of the weather that we deal with has to do with levels of sun or rain, you can use elemental symbols and direct them towards the sky directly above where you are. When I want to clear clouds, I will use the fire triangle. And when I want to build clouds, I'll use the water triangle. Now how you do that is that you kind of, you have to aim it down, so make sure that it's aimed up and around you like so, right? Or you can go, lean back and aim it at the sky like so. When you do that, direct that kind of elemental energy through the triangle. For instance, heat, warm energy through the fire triangle, or cool water energy through the water triangle, and visualize the clouds either slowly coming together or slowly dissipating. Also keep in mind a certain degree of time limit. Now, I did this for our most recent Beltane celebration here because, again, it was a rainy day and I wasn't really particular about it. I just wanted it to be dry enough to do the ritual. Everything else, we have buildings. I didn't mind if it was indoors or outdoors, but we needed it for the maypole and the ritual. So I directed some fire energy towards the clouds directly above my house, gently keeping it in mind that I didn't want to over-influence things or tip the balance too much. And I set an intention of a time limit of 2 hours. So for 2 hours, it kind of, dribbled a little bit here and there, but it was mostly sunny. And I understand that it was pretty localized. It stopped near the bottom of the hill where we are, and then near the top of the mountain it stopped. And around there it rained. When the 2 hours were up, almost precisely, I think there was about a 10 to 15 minute differential. All of a sudden the wind came whooshing back in, which, again, you can't get away with not doing damage of some kind, having the boomerang effect, because the wind came in, it tore the tarp off the top of our shelter a bit. We had to repair it, right? And we had to kind of run everything in, but it accomplished our purpose. Now, I just recently had an insight that dealing with complex chaos systems, perhaps this is why people are not usually effective at money spells. If you remember one of my earliest episodes of Sick for a Spell, I did a spell to increase finances at my business. And it lasted for quite some time, but then it faded, and there was also a slump. I'm thinking, and I've been working magic along this line over the past little while, and so far so good. I won't go so far as to say that it's a success yet, but I seem to be having better results of accumulating sources of income that remain steady, and my finances are gradually improving. So ultimately the lesson is, don't be impatient and don't expect instant gratification when dealing with chaos systems, complex systems, and that's it for Sit for a Spell today. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye.